Watch this.
Finally, a bill that actually might help Idahoans, at least if you're an Idahoan looking to rent. A sort of reversal of regulations when it comes to application fees. It's the feud over public school funding formulas. It's been the same for decades, but now there are two ideas vying for legislative approval.
The amount of code and rules that come out of this body are pretty significant.
And we're only about 6 weeks into this session, yet another bill to put more requirements on public schools is now in the system, a day after lawmakers agreed to pay for private school tuition without any restrictions. It was just last year when Idaho lawmakers laid down the law on local governments, passing a law that cities could not regulate rent, rental fees, or deposits. Another law legislators aimed directly at Boise, who prior to 2024 had put a limit on application fees, and they didn't allow discrimination based on income when it came to rentals. However, rising rental costs don't seem to be slowing down anytime soon, which is why some lawmakers thought, well, rental application fees might be something to reconsider. And yesterday, Idaho senators decided there should be some limits on how property managers collect those fees. Aspen Shumpert breaks down the change of course on the Senate floor.
Idaho is now considered one of the least affordable housing markets in the United States. That means that getting into a rental is highly competitive and very challenging.
Senator Allison Robbie is trying to lessen the load on renters with Senate Bill 1042, which passed the Senate floor Wednesday.
In speaking with nonprofits from across the state of Idaho, abuse of rental application fees has cited as one of the biggest challenges that their clients, veterans, seniors, young people, single moms, are dealing with.
The bill aims to regulate rental application fees amid growing concerns by ensuring property owners are disclosing all rental requirements, like criminal history and credit scores, before an application is submitted. Property managers also wouldn't be allowed to accept application fees for any space not available within 60 days. The bill says an owner can only charge fees to 2 potential renters at a time and can't seek out other applicants unless one of those is denied.
They couldn't afford that $300 rent increase, so they tried to move. They applied to dozens of places. They told me over 20 places. They had paid over $1,000 in application fees and had not heard a single response back. By the time they got to the end of that month, they couldn't afford that $300 increase, but they had used up most of their savings paying application fees. So they got evicted.
Debate on the bill was divided between lawmakers who support protecting renters and those who argue this bill is government gone too far.
It's the government stepping into the private sector and telling private business owners who have invested their own time, their own labor, their own effort, their own money into running a business, how to run that business. It puts restrictions on those property owners, those landlords.
I don't think it's government's role to codify best practices. Best practices are what those in the industry do, what they establish among themselves, but that's a private sector concept. That's not a government sector concept.
I don't think it's restrictive, and I think it will help. I look at it as if my kids were going to apply for a rental somewhere, I wouldn't want them to be taken advantage of on some of these application fees.
I have had many people come to me with very, very sad stories about what they've been through trying to just secure a rental for their families. And I think this levels the playing field.
There are special provisions in this bill that cover waiting lists for affordable and senior housing. The bill does allow specially designated properties like those to collect an application fee from more than 2 potential renters if those details are disclosed. Now, the Senate Bill 1042 will head to the House for further conversations.
It was interesting watching this debate yesterday with Senator Foreman saying we have a legal system for this, that if you feel like you've been wronged when it comes to this, you can then go take them to court. But that's the thing. This bill is aimed at those that can't really afford to do those things. So it's to help them. And the other side of that was, it was interesting to hear Senator Brian Lenny say, yeah, we regulate businesses all the time in this body, so this shouldn't be any different. So right.
Yeah, and when you're going through rental applications, there's not necessarily a contract yet. So there's not a lot to dispute at that time.
Yeah, all right. Thank you very much. Aspen? Well, the same lawmaker who wanted to remove the requirement for Idaho kids to go to school now wants to make sure if those kids are in a public school, well, everything their teacher might use to teach them has to be posted online each year by October 1st. All learning materials, textbooks, course syllabi, and any and all supplemental materials.
This ensures that parents have full visibility into what their children are being taught, promoting transparency and accountability in education.
Yes, accountability in education. More on that in a moment. This bill was introduced in the House Education Committee, by the way, so it didn't take long for the one and only teacher on the committee with a master's in education and 20 years experience in the classroom to speak up. Representative Monica Church from Boise.
I have never met a teacher that knows everything. You know, you sometimes you go faster than you think, and so you need to add materials at the end of a unit, or something happens in the world and you decide you want to add a unit about that. I feel like this is not recognizing the boots on the ground.
Now, we couldn't possibly look into every school district website today, but we did check out Boise and West Ada's, the two largest in the state, and they both have their curriculum, and it looks like most of the materials they use posted online. Now, is it everything that they will use throughout the entire year? Don't know. And we don't know if this is across the state that most districts are doing this. But there's another part of this bill that caught Representative Church's attention, which basically says classroom instruction by public school personnel on sexual orientation or gender identity cannot happen in kindergarten through third grade. Representative Church was curious about that language.
Like, what does that mean? When we talk about Title IX, that's gender identity. Like, what does it mean not to teach gender identity in this bill?
We know that there's been a movement in different states, and I'm not saying it's in Idaho elementary schools, but there's been an encouragement to, I don't even want to use the term misgender, because I've been accused of that by saying the wrong word to somebody who I assumed was one thing and it wasn't. I think these parameters are really clear. I'm not sure that, I don't follow your questioning. I think you know the answer, so I don't know why you're asking me. I don't think that this is some vague thing that we're dealing with here.
Representative Hawkins thinks his parameters are pretty clear and not vague, yet it took him 40 seconds there to come up with that non-answer to Representative Church's question, which is why Representative Church made a motion to end this bill right there and then.
The sponsor has admitted that, one, this may not be happening in Idaho and so not necessary, and two, it is very difficult for a public school teacher or administrator to uphold rules when the definitions are not clear. And if a second grader asks, why is there a girls basketball team and a boys basketball team, that could very clearly fall under personnel talking about gender identity from kindergarten through third grade.
True. Well, then there was another point made by Representative Mark Sauter on the committee, who reminded the rest of the committee about yesterday's passage of House Bill 93. Would there be a consideration to amend this bill, the one introduced today, to include all schools, public and private, since, well, Idaho tax dollars are being used for private school education is just one signature away from becoming a reality. Representative Hawkins said that was outside the scope of what they were talking about today. So, in other words, likely no, which led to Representative Chris Mathias to reference the school choice agenda in Idaho and end the bill's discussion this way.
There is no competition in the school choice market because we put regulation and requirement. We just stack them up on the public schools. So to suggest that they're able to compete with private schools is just nonsense.
Yeah, layers and layers of rules and regulations, which is understandable because as a taxpayer, you should expect some accountability for your return on your investment. But that's not necessarily the case with the recently passed parental choice tax credit bill, which is awaiting Governor Little's signature. House Bill 292, the bill was approved for printing, and we will see if it does get a hearing in the House Education Committee.
This is a bill that begins to modernize our public school funding formula, which is now over 3 decades old.
So we brought this up before also when it comes to funding Idaho schools. It's not always just about how much, but how these schools can access the cash that has been divvied out to them. Well, last week we spoke with State Superintendent Debbie Critchfield about her idea to change that funding formula. And today there was another one brought forward that is sort of similar. So Joe Paris took a look at this one and I guess comparing the competing ideas.
Yeah, it's a swipe at a very similar topic, but in a different way. So here's what we're talking about here, and I want to preface this whole conversation that we're talking about discretionary funding here. We're not talking about base funding for things like the career ladder and the permanent building fund, stuff like that. So the details here in terms of the differences between the proposals both show a major effort to change how Idaho funds public schools. And again, discretionary funds is what we're talking about, money for things that the state doesn't send money for. And something we've heard in recent years, really in the school choice funding debate, is people want to see money follow the student, making sure that there are specific allocations not based on overly complicated support unit or staffing formulas. In this proposal, though, there is a specific exception.
This bill converts the discretionary amount of funding to a per pupil amount unless you're a small rural school district. Then it gives you, it keeps you at the old structure of the funding formula for this year.
So the concept is to calculate those discretionary funds based on the number of students currently attending each school. In rural schools, they fear that they will lose in this formula. So the bill accounts for losses compared to the current metric, because the baseline here is regardless of attendance, there are things that each school needs, and less students is less funding. So there is that exception in this legislation. In a committee, a couple of lawmakers, they touched on how complicated the formula is right now. If you've ever looked into it, it's hard to get your mind around. But one that doesn't account for the type of students that a school hosts. Both reform ideas, one we talked about last week and this one, it touches on that. This proposal, though, spells out the formula concept as a first step.
The bill also does call for moving to a weighted per student funding formula in next year. And the fiscal note is $14.2 million, and all of that money will go to small and rural districts.
Sponsor wants to get the student weights dialed in for next year using this as a building block. And the legislation we talked about last week from the Senate Education Committee, that actually has the weighted categories already built in. So the roadmap here is this is intended to be the first step in the shifting of the model. Next year, everything needs to be refined to encompass a weighted per student formula that sends those discretionary funds using a base amount per student, like we talked about last week, and then adding the additional characteristics, the weighted student characteristics. So, Brian, it's really different speeds within the bill on reform, but overall, it seems that the lawmakers have decided that moving from support units, which is a whole complicated funding formula, to having
down to
money,
the 100%. Yeah,
it's unbelievably complicated. I invite you to put yourself to sleep trying to read it. But they want to, have the student follow the money per pupil funding. I do want to mention the legislation that we talked about last week. It does have this hold harmless language in it that essentially says, rural school districts and small school districts that would stand to possibly lose money, they would be kept whole, meaning they would get at least what they're getting now for the next 2 years. Again, though, we'll see how lawmakers dive into this conversation. It is very complex.
All right, yeah, it's a little bit into the weeds, but that's fine. I just wanted to circle back on this. Still talking about school funding, but you might find this interesting. We were told today that there was a problem with people trying to contact the governor's office with regard to House Bill 93, and that the system was getting bogged down. And I got this note from the governor's office saying that midday through the day, they had to switch, kind of expand what the system would allow to take in because they were getting so many calls. I'm not sure if it's for or against House Bill 93.
So it was calls and, because I had heard this too, so calls and emails or just calls?
Right now it's just calls. We'll see. We'll see. I asked how many emails, how many phone calls. Okay, we'll see if we get an answer to this. So.
We'll have to do a double check on this because I'm curious. In the old days, and by old days I mean as recently as last year, I know that the governor's secretary, she sat at her desk
and had to take every one.
And I watched her do it. She would put down check marks and she would listen to people, and she did a great job. Claudia, if you're watching, we miss you. Hope you're doing well. I don't know what the new system looks like, but very interesting.
Yeah. All right. We'll see. Thanks, Joe. Students marching at Idaho State University while others racing down Bogus Basin, and you might want to race them a call this weekend for the Winter Carnival. There's a lot going on around the 208, and Abby Davis is here to tell you all about it in today's 411.
A judge says prosecutors can use DNA evidence in their case against the man accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students more than 2 years ago. Brian Koberger is scheduled to go to trial later this year for those murders. Last month, Koberger's attorneys argued police violated his right to privacy when they collected DNA evidence. So they asked the judge to throw out that evidence, but this week the judge denied their request.
These centers have been able to help students who have faced greater challenges.
This is why we have to fight! Students at Idaho State University protested the university's recent diversity, equity, and inclusion changes on campus. Back in November, ISU eliminated programs and made a central hub. Students say they're feeling the loss of the places they used to call home.
Racing, snowboarding, skiing, freestyle, doing a bunch of cool tricks, and it's a really great opportunity to build community and meet some new people.
Today is the first day of the 65th Dottie Clark Championship races at Bogus Basin. More than 1,000 junior high and high school students are racing in 4 different events. The race celebrates Bogus's school race program. Abby Wilt will take you there live during the news at 6. McCall is hosting a different type of winter wonderland this weekend. The McCall Winter Carnival starts tomorrow and runs through Sunday. You can enjoy music, parades, and of course, the iconic snow sculptures.
It's really amazing that people have honed this craft to such a level.
The city of Boise is getting a new flag, and they want your help. City leaders want a flag that reflects Boise's culture, values, and identity. The contest is open to everyone living in the city, but you have to hurry because the deadline to submit is this Monday. You can submit your idea on the city's website. That's the 411 on the 208. I'm Abby Davis.
Gorgeous photos of the snow across the state. Not much snow left here in the Treasure Valley, except maybe in those shady spots where it got piled up from scraping, shoveling the driveway, right? But we've had a very wet February so far. I thought we'd take a quick check of the numbers. Total precipitation in Boise, remember this is just for Boise. So far this month, we're just shy of 2.5 inches of total precipitation. That includes a whopping 11 inches of snow. Remember that snow, if you took it, melted it down, whatever liquid you're left with, that's included in this total precipitation number. On average in February, we see just about 1 inch of total precipitation and just over 3 inches of snow. So both of these numbers far and above our typical setup for the month of February. We have had 15 days out of 20 with precipitation. A couple of those were just traces, but still 12 days of measurable rain and or snow here in Boise. So it has been a very soggy start to the month. But man, looking outside right now, you'd be hard pressed to believe yesterday even happened. Look at the blue sky out here. 43 in Boise right now, 41 currently in Twin Falls. Beautiful up in the mountains, 35 in McCall, where preparations are underway for the winter carnival that kicks off tomorrow. That storm system is still exiting off to the east. A few light little snow showers popping up over Idaho Falls and Pocatello. But for our neck of the woods, it is over and done with. And we stay dry and pretty seasonable heading into the final day of the work week tomorrow. That is courtesy of a ridge of high pressure that will, for the most part, deflect this storm system up and around our ridge. There's a very slim chance late Friday into Saturday morning, portions of northeast Oregon and potentially some of our central mountain locations could get just a few light snow showers from that system. We're really, though, watching a system coming in on Sunday that will bring our next significant round of wet weather. But this is likely it for the next week or so. That means the winter carnival, a bit of a mixed bag as far as conditions go. Dry and partly sunny tomorrow, highs in the low 30s, cold mornings, especially tomorrow and Saturday. Few snow flurries possible in McCall on Saturday. Then we'll likely see snow early Sunday morning, but with temperatures in the upper 30s, could see rain as high as 5,500 feet on Sunday. But still, as everything is wrapping up, might be a little soggy, but pretty nice conditions overall. Looking ahead to Friday in the Magic Valley, tons of sunshine for Twin Falls, highs in the low 40s. Very cold start across the Snake Plain tomorrow, though. Low temperatures in the 20s. Sun Valley will get up to 34 with a mix of sun and clouds overhead. Friday looking good in Long Valley. We'll see those low to mid 30s for McCall, Donnelly, and Cascade. Dense fog is possible in the lower Treasure Valley tomorrow morning, something to be mindful of. And where the fog holds on longer, like Ontario and Weiser, temperatures may only stay in the upper 30s, but we should see 40s in places that see the sunshine emerge a little bit sooner tomorrow. Starting off at 22 in Boise, landing in the mid 40s and lighter winds tomorrow. So a pretty pleasant wrap up to the work week. Over the weekend, highs climb near 50 degrees. That's why on Sunday we will see just rain here in the valley, but will likely be a soggy end of the weekend. But look at Monday, something to look forward to after that rain, a high of 55 degrees to start the work week.
All right, welcome back. Let's get to your messages. We've got one from Melissa here to share with you. It says, yet another example of hypocrisy from our state legislature. They talk of government overreach regarding caps on rental application fees, yet they have no trouble telling parents what books their kids shouldn't read, what kind of health care women shouldn't receive, what couples can or cannot get married, and the list goes on. Yet, when voters are asked what they want their elected officials to do, I'm pretty certain affordable housing is near the top of the list. That and healthcare and education, those are all usually near the top of the list every year. Is there a way to see if any Idaho representatives that oppose any kind of regulation of application fees are getting money from big property management companies? I'm not sure about that, but I do know during debate yesterday, several senators stood up and said they declare House Rule 39H, which means, yes, there's a conflict of interest there. And a lot of those voted for this bill that would regulate that a little bit. Let the legislators teach. They seem to know everything. Taught school for years, had lesson plans after lunch, but a snake was found in the playground, Ann says. So we spent a lot of time talking about snakes. Wasn't in the lesson plan, but they did it anyway because that's what the kids wanted to talk about. That's kind of how things work sometimes. I don't have kids in school and I don't use a city park, so I'm going to need a voucher for $5,000 to redo my backyard, says Don. Well, actually, you're contractually obligated because of the Constitution to pay for that.
Continue with us and watch free now on the KTVB Plus app everywhere you stream.